Wedges. We're going to talk about wedges. It's a topic, right? Wedges explained. That's what we're going to do next. And a bit of a special announcement, so stay tuned. Welcome back to the McGolf Shop. Jim McCleary here. This is the McGolf channel where we talk about golf club repairs, golf club reviews, and golf club fittings. Also, your scores can go low. Join us Mondays for a live stream where we talk about the same stuff, 17:30, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It's on the YouTube channel, Facebook page, and we talk about the same stuff. It's just question and answer between you and I. It's a good time. All right, special announcement. I have three Tura wedges. Tura sent me these wedges as a thank you for doing a review. Unsolicited, and they're very, very nice wedges. Here's two of the three of them. I got a 52, a 56, a 52, a 56, and a 60. All right, 52, 56, and a 60. They are right-handed. All right, and it will also come with a little bitty Tura golf towel. And basically, I'm going to give these away. All right, they're right-handed. I can't use them. So the only way you can win these is if you comment below. All right, comment below. I will ship you these heads, and you can make them yourself. Or if you want us to make them, then we can arrange something at that particular point. But you have to comment below, right? I'd appreciate it if you like it and then comment below, but you have to comment below in order to be part of the contest. Alrighty, so let's get started with, more of this wedge stuff. Wedges explained. That's an important topic. Let's talk about some wedges. Wedges. Why did I pick wedges? Well, I've got about 9 custom wedges I got to put together. And each one of them is a little bit different than the next. And there seems to be some mystique out there. So let's do some basics, okay? We'll start with the basic stuff first. Number one, there's wedges. How many wedges are there out there? Well, you got the pitching wedge, you got a gap wedge, you got an attack wedge, you got a sand wedge, you got a lob wedge. Those are some of the basics, right? Now, what does all that mean? Well, there's certain basic things that will describe a wedge. Number one is its loft. All right, its loft. And in the pitching wedge, the gap wedge, and the attack wedge, which can be interchangeable depending on the manufacturer, that could be that. All right, depending on the manufacturer, they could be interchangeable. Sometimes they are not. So let's go over that first. All right, the pitching wedge used to be around 46, 47, 48 degrees. Actually, probably closer to 50 back in the day. 47, 48, 46 were a typical. Now, with a lot of these stronger lofted clubs that are coming out, we're seeing stuff like 43, 45, all right, in that range. Well, when you move the loft back that far, you have too big of a gap. And what they do is they'll introduce another wedge. So you can go a pitching wedge, attack wedge, a gap wedge before you start getting into the sand wedges. Now, typically, the A wedge or the G wedge and the P wedge are all of the design of the golf club. All right, now to take it go way out, this is a Wilson launch pad. That thing's a monster, okay, and it's a hybrid club, but that's the pitching wedge. Then we have one that's the Srixon, and this is the ZX5. And this is more of the golf club as well. And then here is the Mizuno and the Tour model. So those are all the pitching wedges. Now the gap wedges or the attack wedges will have similar characteristics, similar looks to those. Why would I say you need that? Well, because in a lot of cases, unless you're a really, really, really strong golfer, that the gap wedge is built like the iron and is way more forgiving. And it will be probably the last full swing club that you should be using. Should be using. So, you want a pitching wedge, a gap wedge, or attack, or all three, depending on your model. And I would suggest this, that you use them like the irons, right? Make them like the irons, not like what you will see in traditional wedges, which we're going to cover next, okay? And that's because of its forgiveness. It's forgiveness, all right? And if you're a very, very strong golfer, or one that hits the ball very, very far, that may change your opinion. But those are the ones, and that's the reason why I do that. If you're a strong golfer, yes, you can use a regular wedge. If you're not, I would suggest the other in order to make your short game better. That's the idea. All right, now as we get into these things, let's talk about that a little bit more. So you can have cavity back, A wedges, G wedges, P wedges. And when you start getting sand wedges, then you start looking more like blades, more of the traditional what we're going to be thinking about. And so what we're going to show you here is more of that, okay? So how do we define a wedge? We define a wedge by its loft. We define a wedge by its bounce. We define a wedge by its sole grind. And then we define the wedge by its face and the grind, or the coarseness of it. Those are the big four. Now you notice I didn't talk about hosel size, I didn't talk about offsets, I didn't talk about any of that stuff because literally they're almost in the same bucket, right? Depending on the hosel size is irrelevant because you're going to assemble them or they come assembled and you're going to know how to do that. That's a build. That's not part of the, wedges explained. Offset, almost always they're going to be very, very close to zero. Some will have a little bit of pro set and some may have a little offset, but it's inconceivable to the eye. So let's just stick with the big four. Alrighty, so, and there's another one that we go on to, and it's a coating, all right? It's a coating for that. So lofts, when we talk about lofts, and we want to see, we talk about lofts, and we want to go sand wedge. Sand wedge can be anywhere from 54 to 56, okay? 50, and typically I would say 55 to 57 for me. 54 is like a very weak gap wedge or a really, really strong sand wedge. And I don't think, based on what you would use the sand wedge for, i.e. getting out of the sand, thick, rough and stuff, that the 54, you're getting really close to not working, okay? And that's what we're looking at now. So let's just keep it simple. 55 to 57 for a sand wedge. All right. 58 to 60, or maybe in 58 to 61 for a lob wedge. Now there are 64 degrees out there. I call those X lob wedges. They're not one that's more conducive to a bunch. I know Pels would be real mad at me, but they're just not used out there that very much. Alrighty, so what do we say with that? So each manufacturer is going to have a different idea. Each fitter could have a different idea. And what you're doing is, on the average, you're gapping them. All right, so if your gap wedge, let's just say, is 50 degrees, you may want a 5-degree bump between the two of them. So you go 55 and 60, you can be there. You could be one of those folks that wants only a 4-degree bump between those, and that would be 54, 58. See where I get with all that? All right, and it depends again on the strength of the golfer. If you're a slower swing speed, I would suggest a wider gap. If you're a higher swing speed or a stronger golfer, I would suggest a smaller gap. All right, so that's loft in a nutshell. Now, how is loft determined? It's mostly gapping and in how it gets into your set. How you attack the wedge, that's different. And that takes us into bounce. Bounce is probably one of the most, unknowledged terms. I guess that's the way to call it. Bounce is nothing more than the measure of, from the leading edge, a straight line, the angle that is before the leading edge. If I had a straight line, at the opening, the angle to the leading edge to here. Now there are multiple bounce measurements that you can measure all across here. 3 or 4 points here, 3 or 4 points here, and 3 or 4 points here. And that takes you into the grind, which we'll talk to next. However, bounce, okay? Bounce. There are, in the day, we started using definitions of sliders and diggers. and slider diggers and digger sliders and all that other stuff. Then you have to take into account the where you play and how you play. So, for instance, we'll just go right down the middle. If you're an average golfer and you're not taking a monster divot, yet you're not sliding, just you're just grazing the grass, maybe catching a little bit of a divot. You're not coming in and you're not attacking it, and the places that you're playing are, we'll just say, well kept, not super manicured, but well kept. And you're playing that, you could use what would be standard bounces, standard grind, standard everything. Now, if you're said same golfer, but yet you play in something that is hard pan or is very trimmed very close, the sand bunkers are not raked as much. The rough is not as dense, or it's not as fluffy. Everything is very, very, very hard, very, very harsh to an extent. Then something with a lower bounce could help you out. The opposite is true, as if it's well manicured, it's very fluffy, the second layer of cut is very dense, then more bounce is required. All right, now you take into account from your standard, if you're a guy or gal that slides under the ball, right, that you slide under the ball, you may need just very little, you need lower bounce. If you're a guy that attacks the ball and comes in steep, i.e. the digger, then you would need more bounce. So you got to kind of mesh all those things. And then you go, well, if I go on vacation, then what do I need? Well, you're kind of stuck, right? So you got to take some of those considerations, some of those conditions, some of the way that you play in order to understand bounce. All right. Now, how you play can also impact this, but how you play also can impact the type of grind that you want to talk about. Now, we have several different here, where this one is a D grind, and the D grind has, this is for Mizuno, a D grind, a little bit wider sole, a little bit more heel and toe relief. They also have, this is an X grind, and if you look at this one, it's a much wider sole, but the relief isn't nearly as pronounced. If you look at the Wilson Staff, which is a different one, this is what I would call a tour grind. It is just very, very little heel and very narrow. You have something from Callaway, and this is their version of a standard grind, where the leading edge is what is killed or beveled, and then the back end is taken care of. Not a lot of heel and toe relief. However, they have a W grind, which would be a wider sole, and if you see the wider sole, and you can see the curvature right there. It's not a lot of heel and toe relief, but there's a lot of relief in the back and into the front. All right, so there's a lot going on. There's C's, D's, X's, M's, F's, tours. There's just you got to check each manufacturer. So what am I telling you about on this one? So if you're a person I call as an artiste, and you're one of those person that loves opening the blade. You love opening the blade, and you like hitting that flop shot, and you like getting underneath the ball. Well, then something that's a wide grind is not going to be your friend. You want something with a relief in the back, maybe a little bit of heel and toe, something that likes to open. And you might find it in the way of another, like a C grind here. And I'm using this where you can obviously see the heel, you can see the toe, and then we have a bit of a rounded flare. And then what happens is that this can do one of those without the leading edge coming up a lot, right? With a lot. Now, more relief means more opening. And if you can get underneath there. Now, if you're a person that doesn't do a lot of that, and I call that point, click, and chip, and you just hit it and it's a tool and off it goes, then something that is a standard grind or even a wide sole so that you can thud the ground and get the ball up can work just as well. One other thing I would include here is if you're doing a lot of hills or a lot of moguls, then heel and toe relief can be very important, as we use this one, as the nose or the heel of this club will not want to dig. If it stood straight across, much like this full toe from Wilson, it is very, very wide. This is a great point, click, and chip. He has set it down, bam, and it goes way out. However, if you were in a mogully situation and you had an uphill or a downhill, there's a real opportunity to engage just the heel or just the toe. And that would be removed if you had it removed back in here or removed at the toe. So there's that. There is that one. So you have to know your conditions, and you got to know how you play. So that takes care of those. So we got the lofts, which we know, right? 55 to 57, 58 to 60 or 61, and then we go down the other way. We're also talking about the bounce, and that is how it's measured in the leading edge above the turf. And that's measured in degrees. And then for designers, they measure multiple places. The other one is the grind, and the grind is also incorporated with bounce for the type of player and the type of conditions. The minute you hit one that's not good for you, you'll instantly understand what I'm saying. Now, not the last, but the next one is face. All right, the face. What you'll see in a lot of cases is now we're saying, coarseness of a face is actually measured from a USGA perspective. You can't have it too coarse because they don't want to create too much spin. And when you're hitting a wedge, you really don't want that anyway. You want to drop and stop. The whole idea of pulling it back, there are people that can do it, but in most cases it's a pipe dream. You just want to get it and stick it and be done with it, right? That is more precise than hitting it far and being able to check it back. That's few people, right? That's few people. However, the face is measured with grooves. Grooves have a width, they have a depth, they have an edge, and then they have the coarseness that's in between the grooves, and there is a measurement that you have to take for that. So all the designers have to, turn their wedges in, have them measured so that they make the USGA standards and they are legal to use. I'm not going to go in the depths of U grooves or square grooves or M grooves or anything like that. All right. Suffice it to say that the job of the groove is to remove debris, right? If you're playing in the dew or fresh cut, it's to take that dew and that fresh cut grass and move it away from the ball strike. That's what its job is. The coarseness comes from the edge of the groove or the in between the grooves, and that's what's grabbing the ball in order to make it go. So that's the face. Now the other part is you'll see in some cases where you have this is a blank and that's a blank. All right. In other cases, and I can't really show it to you because I don't want to take the label off, but what you'll see is the lines go all the way across. All right, that's in this particular model, and it is in that particular model. I probably ought to take this sticker off so you don't have to worry about weight. There we go, in that particular model. And we call those are called full toes, high toes, full face raw, whatever you want to call it. But they go all the way across. Personally, I like that. I don't necessarily subscribe to in the between, but that's just what it is. All right. So you have grooves. The grooves have dimensional properties. They have to be within the rules in the USGA. There's a level of coarseness that you got to have, and then it's about what you like looking down upon. All right. And then whether or not you like them all the way across or you don't. Okay. Looking across becomes a personal preference. Now the last bit is the coating, right? We like a coating. What's a coating all about? Well, there are coatings, right? Normally you see in a traditional wedge, we'll use this guy. In a traditional wedge, it'll look like that, right? There's some shiny spots, there's some dull spots, and we'll call that a chrome wedge, all right? Then you can get to some of these, we won't call them exotic coatings, but Mizuno has done something cool with what they call a denim copper, and it also has a raw face on it, okay? We also have the PVD or black finishes that Callaway does, and these are very coarse in their consistency as well. And that does that do anything for the wedge itself? 9 times out of 10, no. It's a cosmetic appeal. Now, in darker wedges, when you use the PVD coatings, they can become, instead of being soft, they become hard, and they become hard to bend. And that's not something you want, because that will break, right? The denim copper by itself is a very, very soft metal, so you can get away with that. Then you have the chrome, which we all know about that one. If you try and, really manipulate it, you can spider web it, and then we don't want that. And finally is the raw. And basically raw is no coating. And that tends to patina and gets all the rusty. Some people think that's cool. I'm not a fan, but the funny part is it's rusting on the outside. If you're truly hitting your wedges well, the place where you're hitting your wedges won't have any of the rust. It should be a nice wear mark, just like a wear mark on the black will be chrome, and on these chromes they actually turn black because you're wearing out the face. All right, so we so we have that. So we have those 4, 5 parameters in which to deal with a wedge. All right. So when we do wedges, number one, you got to know what loft you are. The loft determines your distance. Yes, you can manipulate it, but these are standard. I'm not trying to hit one low or high, and that'll do your distances: pitch, attack gap, sand, lob. All right. Don't be afraid to put 4 or 5 wedges in the back. The other one is the bounce. Bounce is your friend in a lot of cases. It depends on the conditions. How you attack the ball, the conditions you're in, is what you can use to kind of get you in that ballpark. Because not every wedge is going to have something that, you can have all this heel and toe relief and not have enough bounce. So you're going to have to give and take with that. The last one is the grind, or not the last, but next to last is the grind. And the grind is another one in conditions and where you play, whether or not you want to be able to open or not, or in hilly or not, and what you want to do with the wedge. The other one is face. The face comes in the way of coarseness, the number of grooves, the depth of the grooves, the width of the grooves, the edges of the grooves, and whether or not they go across the face or they're in their traditional framing of the golf ball. And then lastly is coatings. Coatings can impact the spin, but I don't believe it's used to do that. It's more of a decorative thing. Some people like darker wedges, some people like lighter wedges. It's just all about what you like. All right, so hopefully when you go to buy your next wedge, the last part I want to tell you about is lie angle. Lie angle is paramount on a wedge, because the change in the lie angle can change your direction radically, and that is important. So it's all about turf interaction, but for wedges it's all about pointing, and we can do that. So if you liked everything what you saw, hit the like button, join us on the live streams, and as always, let's see your scores. Go low.